Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. Broadcasting throughout the United Kingdom and around the world on all our digital platforms, bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every week on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter and on TikTok. And thanks to the folks coming in on TikTok, please stick with us for this hour. We broadcast every Wednesday from 7 until 8, and this evening we have a fantastic guest coming on at 7:30, none other than Carl Dean Pearson, who will be well known to many of you watching. And he's going to be coming on the programme, and if you know Carl, you know that he's never, ever short of an opinion on anything. And so that's going to be a really good session, 20-minute interview with Carl at the bottom of the hour at 7:30. And just before 7:30, of course, we have our competition, which we have every week, which will be asking you a question about something on this day, the 16th of February, in British history. And that's for our patriotic sweets, which we have for you each week. So please do enter our competition. If you've never done it before, it's easy enough. You just send an email, and we'll put the email address up there. You just send an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person with the right answer will get these sweeties celebrating 100 years of the Royal British Legion. Okay, that'll be coming up about 7:25. In the meantime, there's an awful lot to talk about this week because a lot has been happening, and we're just going to say hello to some of the people coming in there. Good to see Debbie, and who says good evening to every Unionist watching. Always nice to see Frankie in the house, and Adam in the house as well. Says hello, fellow Brits, and good to see Stephen as well. I had a question, Stephen, about ScotRail. Closed down today at 4 o'clock for some reason. I don't know what that was about. Maybe you might know about that. Tommy says good evening, and Harry says evening from Sussex. Lovely, lovely Sussex. And Sandra says hi, fellow Brits. It's great that we've got a place for fellow Brits to congregate, isn't it? Good evening to Catherine, who says hello to everyone, and also to Christopher and to Mark, who's always on our Facebook page. Thanks for your input on our Facebook page, Mark. It's always very much valued. And Damon Williams says constant common sense. Constant common sense. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Because we live in a world that seems to be going mad. Somebody just actually sent me an email, says the world's literally going mad. Isn't it just? Isn't it? In some countries worse than others, but and in this country as well. Derek says, good evening, Britain, and hope everyone is safe. And Nelson, we took you up on your suggestion last week, and we invited Carl, and he was delighted to appear. So can't wait to get to that fantastic interview with Carl. Ryan says, good evening from windswept Yorkshire. Stephen says the British Legion, which are that these sweets are celebrating, would it still exist in an independent Scotland? And Adam says, the guy who burnt 2 Union Jacks in Bannockburn is striking again with Union Jacks to commemorate the massacre before the act. Yes, he's always doing that. The thing is, people give him far too much publicity for his silly actions, and we try to ignore him. Stephen says that the ScotRail stopped running as a precaution due to the storms. I wonder if they've ever done that before. I've never heard of it. I don't know, but you'll know better than I on that one. And Ray says, hi everyone, good to see you, Ray. And Jan, greetings, Earthlings. Sometimes it feels that we've arrived from outer space, I have to say. And Kenny from East Kilbride, otherwise known as East Kilbride. And Stephen says normally trains will just run at a reduced speed on stormy weather. That's what we thought as well. And it just means people have to take the bus, I suppose, or not even be able to travel, which is not easy if you don't have a car of your own. So, what's on people's thoughts tonight? What are your thoughts that we can talk about? I've certainly got one or two things lined up here that we want to be talking about. Really beginning with the crazy situation that's going on in Canada at the moment. Now, I don't know to what extent this is reported on mainstream news, but it's really quite a concern from our perspective, because Canada is part of what we would call the Brito-sphere. You know, they used to call it, and they still do call it, the Anglosphere. That is the people who speak the English language. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States of America. And these countries, 5 of them, were really always quite tight and shared common values. But the last 2 years have shown that certainly in Canada and Australia and New Zealand, there's a lot of things going on there that are not what we would call part of our tradition, our Brito-sphere traditions and values, especially the clamping down on the freedoms of individuals. And we've seen that with Justin Trudeau and his invoking the Emergencies Act, which is basically only really something that you would do in war. Okay, never before used Emergencies Act basically to give his government extra powers to shut down the trucking convoys which are protesting against the mandates. And that's really quite astonishing, because what he's also done is he's given the power to seize the bank accounts of anybody who actually supports them, and to seize the bank accounts of the actual truck drivers themselves. In other words, to make it impossible for them to actually to live. And that sort of thing has never, to my knowledge, been done in a Western society before. And nobody's talking about it. I don't know if the BBC's talking about it. If you've seen it on the BBC, please tell me. But I spoke to somebody who hadn't even heard about that. So I don't know. I know the system's trying to keep it quiet. The system, like the mainstream media, will be trying to keep it quiet. But you have to wonder what on earth is going on there. And the most worrying thing from our perspective is that our leaders, whether Boris Johnson or whether Nicola Sturgeon, have not condemned Justin Trudeau and is invoking the Emergencies Act. They've not condemned him seizing the bank accounts of the truckers, which means if they're not going to condemn it, then it means that they either sympathise with it or they've got plans to do the same thing in this country. And that's very concerning. Now, I spoke to somebody yesterday and they said that maybe the reason that Boris is not condemning Trudeau is because he wants to keep some kind of united front in the face of the Russian debacle on the Ukrainian border. Well, I don't know about that. It seems to me that these people are far too pally with each other. The Justin Trudeaus of this world, the Boris Johnsons of this world, the Joe Bidens of this world, the European Union people of this world, they're all like in on it. You know, they're all best friends, they're all best buddies. And it's like they all sit about and they all figure out, like, what are we going to actually do? And this is brought home to me. We've got a picture there of the G7 who had a meeting. There they are there. And they had a meeting in Cornwall last year. And, like, they're all best mates together. Now, who are they? I'll take it from the left there. That's Justin Trudeau on the far left, and then moving over the guy in the grey suit. I'm presuming that's Norman the foreman, who built that stage. And he probably asked, can I come on as well and just get my picture taken? And they said, yes, but hurry up. It's either Norman the foreman or it is the president of the European Council, who looks quite like him. And then you've got the leader of the free world, possibly wondering where he is at that precise moment. And then you've got Kendo Nagasaki there, the Prime Minister of Japan, who's actually probably the most intelligent one on that platform. Then you've got Boris, and then you've got a horrible man who looks like something from the Walking Dead, who's actually the Prime Minister of Italy. And I'm not even going to grace him with his proper name, because he says that people who have not taken the jab are not, quote, part of our society. So I don't want to even mention him. Then you've got Napoleon Macron, and then you've got Jemima Gina, who is the president of the European Commission, I believe. And then you've got Angelina Jolie, who is the sometime German Chancellor. So they're all in there together. All having a laugh at our expense, and far too pally with each other. That's the problem. We can get rid of that picture now. But that's the problem. They're all too pally with each other, and hopefully this will be a wake-up call to them, because a politician, and I'm talking about Trudeau here, a politician has to know when his time is up, okay? A politician has to know his best before date, okay? Every politician has a shelf life, and he's got to know his best before date, and he's certainly got to know when his use by date has arrived. And if he doesn't know when his best before date is, or when his use by date has arrived, then the only thing left is the sniff test. And I'm afraid that Trudeau is failing the sniff test, which means that he really does need to step down. And somebody on Twitter today said that either Canada will fall as a consequence of what Trudeau is trying to impose, or he falls, but it's going to be one or the other. And hopefully traditional Canadians will prevail in their efforts to maintain the values and traditions and liberties of Canada, because of course, as many of us know, Canada was formed largely from the British who left America during the so-called Revolution, who wanted to continue to stay with the British Crown, and many of them went north and they founded a new land, and they were called the Loyalists. And there's still in the truckers there's still some of that loyalist spirit left, the true Canadian spirit, the people who founded Canada. We can still see them. We can still see that spirit there. But as far as people like Trudeau are concerned, they don't have any spirit that's born of the people that has risen out organically from history and from the roots of their forefathers in their country. These people are just like, they only have globalist ideology, and globalist ideology is top-down imposition, and sometimes they show their face, and this is definitely a case where Trudeau has shown the ugly face of globalism. And we just have to hope and pray that our leaders themselves will learn from what's going on, and will also back off from continuing to impose any further restrictions on the people. So that's my little bit there about Trudeau, who is messing things up, and has really messed up the Brito-sphere, as we like to call it. Now, Jay Smith there says, I've lost all interest in politics. They're all the same. They don't give a damn about the ordinary people on the street. That's certainly held by some people I know. Well, Stephen says he's invoked emergency powers. That means he can call in the army. What are they going to do? Shoot a trucker peacefully protesting? Exactly. You know, you have to live and let live after a while. You really do. Well, Adam makes a good point. He says Caribbean islands are English speaking too. Well, many of them are still part of what we would call, are still part of the Commonwealth, and they're all part of the Commonwealth basically, and some of them are Commonwealth realms, of course, where the Queen is still head of state, and they are English speaking. But interesting point, when politicians talk about the Anglosphere, they're really only speaking about the main countries there that are named. But of course, as you quite rightly point out, Adam, all of these are British descended, British islands that have been influenced hugely by Britain, and long may that continue, including India, the Republic of Ireland, Malta, and many others. And of course, India has English as a second language, as Adam points out quite correctly there. And that's the great thing about the United Kingdom, is we've still got massive goodwill throughout the world. We call it the wealth that we have in common, the Commonwealth, the British wealth that we have in common, or the British Commonwealth. Worldwide, a tremendous thing. And we're very much pro, as Campbell Walker there says on TikTok, we're very much pro Britain's history and everything that has been achieved from our past, and which is still there in the Commonwealth today. And so that's why it hurts us when we see nations that are like our cousins, sometimes our direct family, behaving in the way that the Canadian leadership has behaved. It's really it's hurting, because that's not how British people are meant to behave. You know, you don't enforce emergency acts on peaceful protesters unless you've got something to hide. Okay. Yeah. So there's good to see Ronald from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. How's the medical situation as far as restrictions and so on go in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Ronald? Is it relatively free? Is it freer than in Canada at the moment? Please keep us informed. Eating fish and chips, he says at the same time. Yeah. Well, good. Any questions there on TikTok, please fire them in also. Kenny says, what about the Greens wanting to turn the M8 into a pedestrian mall? I haven't heard of that one, but you know what? If they wanted to do it, I can imagine they would find a few people who would probably vote for it. But they want to turn everything into a pedestrian mall these days. That's because there's basically no shops left after the terrible lockdowns. We see that here in Glasgow as well. Sauchiehall Street, what a state it's in these days. It was always suffering. We used to have our office just at the end of Sauchiehall Street, just next to the Griffin Bar, and it was suffering back then. You know, that was 5 years ago. But it's even worse now. Lockdowns have basically killed Sauchiehall Street, as we knew they would, and as we warned at the time that they would. But did they listen? No. Yes, indeed, the Prime Minister, as Stephen points out there, has tended to ditch the scaremongers and has lifted restrictions. But of course, here in Scotland, we'll still get them, because our leaders here have to differentiate ourselves from England in some way. And so if England says black, they say white. If England says left, they say right. Yeah. Peter says the Scottish administration tried to limit the responses to this by not publicising it. It is a consultation on their plans to extend COVID laws. Okay, I didn't know about that. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Peter. As Mark says quite rightly, we are the last true flame of freedom in this world. And sometimes I think about that. You know, it's going to be left to Britain to save the world once again. Once again. I can see that happening. Absolutely, Mark. I agree. Because as bad as things are, it's not as bad as it is in some countries. Not that that's much of a consolation, but that's the case. Ronald says his 6-hour ride from the Canadian border with Wisconsin. 6 hours in America is like, you know, half an hour in Scotland. If that makes sense. I remember when I used to live in America, people would say, oh, let's go out tonight. And it was a kind of rural area. And I thought, oh, great, you know, where are we going? And it was like a 3-hour ride to get to like the nearest town. Like, I was like, that's like from here to Birmingham, for crying out loud. And that was just for the night and then come back, you know. Marie says, welcome to Ronald from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. What made Milwaukee famous has made a loser out of me. That's a Jerry Lee Lewis song called What Made Milwaukee Famous, which is a really nice song actually, but it's a bit of a tear in my beer song, you know. Haven't heard it for ages. And of course, what else is Milwaukee famous for? The Fawns and Happy Days. Nelson says he misses the Horseshoe Bar. That's in centre of Glasgow. Well, if you come up, Nelson, to the Horseshoe Bar, do invite us out. It would be nice to meet you. Gold Eagle Media says evening all and evening Marie. And John, good to see John again. Good. Well, in a few minutes we've got our guest coming up, the fantastic Carl Dean Pearson. And but before then, on this day in British history, and I'll ask you a question about this when I finish talking about on this day in British history. So, on this day in British history, 16th of February is today, in 1870, the maiden voyage of the Cutty Sark, which is perhaps the most famous, well, it's undoubtedly the most famous sailing ship that's left preserved in the United Kingdom, other than, of course, like the warships like HMS Victory. It's the most famous commercial sailing ship, shall we say. And indeed, she was a tea clipper. We've got a picture of her there, actually, put that up there. She was a tea clipper which took part in the tea trade from China to Britain. There she is there in all her glory. And she's preserved today, survives as a museum ship and is a popular tourist destination near the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. And basically she ferried goods back and forward from Shanghai, and her first voyage, as I say, was today, 16th Feb in 1870, from London to Shanghai and back again. And she took with her a cargo of wine, spirits and beer, according to Wikipedia, which kind of surprised me. It's like, I'm sure the Chinese could make their own beer, even back in 1870, but for some reason globalism was around, and so they were importing beer from Britain. But on the way back, she brought back usually over £1 million, that's weight of tea with each load, which took her about 109 days. And what we like about that, of course, is that she's a Scottish ship. She was built by Scott and Linton of Dunbarton, and she was launched on the Clyde in November 1869, and she's named after a speedy witch in the Robert Burns poem Tam O'Shanter, because Cutty means short and Sark is an underskirt. And so in the Tam O'Shanter poem, this witch got the nickname Cutty Sark because she wore a short piece of underskirt. So legend has it. And so yeah, she's the last maintained tea clipper in the UK that's of any real note. What else on this day? 16th of February 1965, a man was born. Sorry, no. 1946. 16th of February 1946. Ian Lavender was born, and of course he's best remembered for his role as Private Frank Pike, the youngest member of Dad's army platoon. There he is there in his character, and there he is today or thereabouts. Ian Lavender, and that character very much defined his role really for his entire acting career. Didn't do him any harm in some respects, and brought great joy to millions, as they always say. And it's funny. Okay, we can get rid of that picture now. It's funny how actors can actually represent a nation, isn't it? You know, an actor that makes a real big impression can actually come to define a nation in some ways. And of course, every single one of those Dad's army characters were pitch perfect for what they were trying to portray. They were just amazing characters. Amazing acted characters that came to define so much about Britain, generally in a good way. So I'll ask you a question about that just in a moment. Let's have a wee look at the comments. We've got our guest in the studio, so we'll be bringing our guest up any minute now. And that was his famous joke, wasn't it? Don't tell him your name, Pike. Gold Eagle says, are the yards still open on the Clyde? Well, yeah. They are. The main yard, of course, is BAE Systems, which produces warships. And there is, of course, great controversy about the inability of the Scottish National Party, who commissioned 2 ferries, I think on the other side of the Clyde, commissioned them years ago, and they still haven't been built yet. So there's a lesson there somewhere. Nelson says, she looks fantastic when she's lit up at night. This is the Cutty Sark. Beautiful sight down at Greenwich. Ronald gives us some good news there. He says, the United States is very much still beholden to our old values and traditions we have had. Good. Good. Okay, so my question to you, for those who would like to win this tin of sweeties, these are they're really good sweeties in this presentation tin, which says celebrating 100 years of supporting the Armed Forces community, Royal British Legion, and that's a poppy there in the shape of a bee. Now this can be yours for somebody who sends the first correct answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Now if you haven't done this before, please do pitch in. And if you've done it before, please pitch in as well. But if you haven't done it, all you have to do is send an email there to contact@aforceforgood.uk answering this question. On this day in 1946, the man who played Private Frank Pike was born. What was his name? What was his real name? And if you can send that straight to contact@aforceforgood.uk, you're going to be in with a chance of winning this, which will be winging its way to you tomorrow afternoon. That was the competition time, absolutely. So let's bring in our guest for the next 20 minutes, who is the wonderful Carl Pearson. Please, everybody, say hello to Carl, and let me add him in here.
Good evening.
Hello and good evening, Carl.
Good
How's
evening,
things with you?
Alistair. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm very well. Yourself?
I'm very good indeed, and so glad to have you on, Carl. Many of us will know who you are, but please can you introduce yourself to just tell us what you're up to at the moment?
Of course. So my name is Carl Pearson. For those who do not know me, probably best described as a political activist or political commentator. My interest is in keeping the United Kingdom together, and and of course, during the Brexit campaign, I took quite a heavy hand in promoting that the United Kingdom should leave the European Union and be a fully independent nation.
Good. Now, you have got a YouTube channel at the moment. What's your, and we'll put up the information about that eventually, but what's your plans? Why have you established this YouTube channel?
So essentially, the YouTube channel is covering current affairs, and I hope in due course we'll also cover a little bit of history on the channel as well. But the crux behind it is, Alistair, that I have very little faith in the modern day media establishment, not only in the United Kingdom but around the Western world and the wider world to that effect. And I feel that all alternative media is beneficial to give alternative points of view, and this is why I cover current affairs, and some of which you might hear on the likes of the BBC, etc. But I'm looking at it from a fundamentally different standpoint and trying to put my own spin on it.
And you mentioned that you have very little faith in the media. Why would you say that? He asked rhetorically.
Well, I feel like the media, specifically print press and mainstream media on television, has lost its way in effect and has completely abandoned the values of being British in actuality. And it seems to me like instead of promoting the United Kingdom and promoting the British people, they act against us forcefully. But that's just my opinion on the matter, and I think that's shown in their kind of communications that they put out in their broadcasts. It's a very anti-British kind of propaganda tool, in my opinion, now.
Do you see any kind of good value in it at all?
It's not in the news side of things. I see very little in the news side of things, to be honest with you, especially when it comes to the likes of the BBC, Sky News, ITV, etc. I feel like they are fundamentally establishment globalist puppets that are working against the British people. And the same with the print media as well, the press. But I suppose one kind of caveat to that would be that they do have some good documentaries to a certain extent about history and stuff like this, but that wouldn't be the news side of things. That would just be some of their broadcasting on television.
Yeah. Now, I suppose related to that, you do these videos, and I noticed that your latest one is about something called the Online Harms Bill. Now, I think you released that yesterday, and I looked at it, and I thought it was very interesting. And could you just very briefly tell us what's the issue here? Firstly, what is this bill that's going through Parliament that you've got an opinion on, and what is your concerns about it?
So the online harms bill, or this bill that's brought before Parliament, it needs to be amended, is my fundamental opinion. Firstly, I wouldn't like to see something like this go through because I feel like it could have a negative impact on freedom of speech and expression. But the fundamental basis of this is, well, I'll give you the government standpoint and then I'll give you mine. The government standpoint is it's to limit certain harms on social media, such as drug dealing, weapons dealing, terrorism, etc. However, I feel like it will be an overreaching arm, and although they say they will use it to this effect, I highly, highly doubt that they actually will in the long term. And what I think it will be used to do is further censor the British people. And my real concern with it is it actually hands British government officials executive powers to decide what can and cannot be allowed on the internet based on what may be deemed as offensive. Now, we've seen similar laws like this, such as the hate speech laws in the United Kingdom. We've got a very watered down version of freedom of speech. And I totally understand that with freedom of speech comes a great responsibility, and you can't be saying, inciting violence, etc. But we already have laws that actually cover that and stop that from happening, or you could be prosecuted. And I feel like these are totally unnecessary laws that are almost dictatorial in a sense, that it could strip freedoms away from the British people online. And it puts more power in the government's hands than I think is actually needed or required to tackle the problems, to be honest with you, because these laws already exist.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. These laws already exist. The internet is an absolute cesspit, of course, as
Yes.
we all know, and there's a lot going on to it that shouldn't be on it, from the sake of public safety and public decency, as it were. But as you say, I think most of us are probably quite. We don't mind about that part of the bill. It's the part of the bill that, as you said, that gives the government the ability to say, do you know what, because of this particular policy. It's like, imagine Macron or Justin Trudeau with the power to do that. And in fact, they possibly already have the power just to say, you disagree with us, so we're going to remove you from the internet. And you yourself actually have been a victim of no platforming, but you got back on again.
Yes.
As well.
It's ironic because we often talk about freedom of speech, etc., but there is a great caveat to that if the establishment and the powers that be in certain countries, even in Western free democracies, deem you to be not even offensive but just unwilling to be heard, then they'll make pretty clear to the social media platforms, etc., in a lot of cases, that you shouldn't have the right to air your opinion.
Yeah, and we've seen that in the last couple of years, and it doesn't even have to be something that's what you and I would consider to be particularly controversial, because I was just thinking about that today. I looked out this article which I had printed off a couple of years ago, and this was printed on Sky News on the 15th of November 2020, and it was the Labour Party were calling for what they were calling anti-vaccination content to be stamped out on the internet, on the basis that it was bad for people's health.
Yes.
Okay, and of course, that's very much a matter of opinion. That's not science as such. That's just the Labour Party's opinion on it. But this was what alerted me to something terrible's going on here, because they're actually saying you've got to have a particular opinion on science,
Absolutely.
Rather than on, and it's got to be stamped out. And so some horrible Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth told Sky News blah 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 blah, and so on and so forth, that it was poison and garbage and it was all nonsense and it had to be stamped out. And instead of the Tories going, who are you to talk against that, and why are you against freedom of opinion, they of course doubled down and said, yeah, you're absolutely right. And a government spokesperson said, quote, that they would stop. No, a government spokesperson said, quote, we take this issue extremely seriously and have secured a major commitment from Facebook, Twitter and Google to tackle it by not profiting from such material and by responding to flagged content more swiftly. In other words, if there's stuff out there about science that we don't like, we've spoken to Facebook, Twitter and Google to tell them to get it removed.
Exactly. This is...
And they're doing that in the plain light of day, and they didn't need a law to do that. Okay.
Very, very, very true. Very, very true. And this again is why the law worries me even more, because even though they are doing that without a law, just imagine if they can say, well, actually, in legislation, you're obliged to do this, or else we will either fine you, or even Nadine Dorris said that someone like Mark Zuckerberg could face prison time in the United Kingdom if they failed to remove this content, and it was later kind of backtracked by government spokespeople that wouldn't be the case, and they wouldn't be held personally liable for it, however the company might be. And this is kind of what worries me, that they could use it in a number of avenues. I mean, we've already seen, for example, if a scientist comes out, or a doctor or a medical professional comes out and says something that goes against the narrative, or the government's narrative in various different countries, then they could be removed, or that video or content could be removed from the likes of YouTube, Facebook or Twitter. And we've seen that on YouTube. And that's a fundamental issue, because if you're a real scientist, you should always question everything. Even if you think that your opinion is dead set right, you should question it. And even if you still question it and agree with what you're saying, then it should fundamentally be allowed to be debated. Because we have this tendency, not just in the West, but in the world as a whole in the 21st century, to say, oh, nobody can speak out against the scientists, etc. But they're just human beings, and they are prone to error just as the rest of us are. And in a lot of cases, the scientists don't agree. There's not this great consensus where every scientist agrees on every single point under science. So it should be open to debate, in my opinion. And this is where I worry for this online harms bill, that it could cause issues not just there, but in a number of reasons, and shut out freedom of speech and expression and debate if they don't take it into account.
Very well said, very well said. And do you think there's many MPs that are understanding the situation in the way that you understand it? Do you think there's any hope for it to be ameliorated in such a way that a common sense angle can be brought into this bill?
Well, I think that it could potentially be amended, to be honest with you, and I think that some MPs will be pushing for that from the kind of same standpoint that I am, because they are, there's not many fundamental conservatives, traditionalist conservatives left in Parliament, in my view, but I think the ones that are will certainly see the detriments of this legislation that it could bring into force if it was applied in the United Kingdom. And I do think that there will be a very small and hopefully vocal minority who will speak out against this. But my real worry is with the likes of a lot of globalists in Parliament now that are more looking out for their own jobs and their own self-interests rather than the interests of the British people. I worry that they will oversee and overspeak the ones who will speak out in our favour.
Yeah, that's almost certainly likely to happen. And unfortunately, we can tell how it's all going to go. Kenny, this is what about suggestions from the SNP that laughing at an offensive joke should get you arrested?
I don't know if you want to get me started on what I think about the state of freedom of speech under the SNP, Alistair, but put it this way, I'm no fan of the SNP, and I think that they are taking notes from the likes of China's book when it comes to censorship in some regard, that anything that speaks out against their horrible way of looking at things in the United Kingdom, and specifically Scotland, because that's where they have control, is seen as dissent that shouldn't be allowed. And I think it's absolutely farcical that in a country like the United Kingdom, with such a great history of comedy, and we still have great comedians, but they're maybe not allowed to speak their mind freely. It's a real tragedy that this is shut out in such a manner.
Oh yes, absolutely. PBC this is, I would get rid of Holyrood tomorrow. It has to be demolished. And Adam says, if you were First Minister, that's talking about the SNP there, if you were First Minister, that wasn't his question, he had a question earlier, if you were First Minister, what would your first priority be? Goodness me.
If I was First Minister, well, I would probably put in legislation to shut down Holyrood and give the powers back to the British Parliament, but I'm not sure that even if I was First Minister, I would be able to convince the sitting MSPs, as they speak, to follow me on that. But I would hope that I would be able to. But I think that Westminster has given up powers to the Mickey Mouse Parliament, as I call it, and it's to the detriment of the British people, because, and the Scottish people for that matter, because it doesn't really put power back in the hands of people around in the devolved parliaments like Wales and specifically Scotland. Northern Ireland's a different case for the historical matter, and we'd be there all night if we started discussing that. But if you look at who actually introduced devolution and why it was introduced, they say it's for one reason, and I think it's fundamentally for the opposite reason. Tony Blair brought it in saying it's to give power back and equalise democracy, etc. But we've not actually seen that happen at all, and what we've seen is a very vocal minority being able to take the reins and basically run amok in Scotland and make a laughing stock out of our fine establishments, or what once was fine establishments.
That's a good point. That's a very good point, and it's been designed in such a way that all devolved power really is vested in Holyrood, and Holyrood has the power over the councils. Now, when this interview is finished, I might develop upon that point, because it occurred to me again today, and it's something we've written about in our magazine Do More Together. But just very briefly, that Michael Gove announced a levelling up programme, which is a lot of money that basically the British Parliament's going to be given to the English councils. And here in Scotland, that's going to be very difficult for them to do, because they have to give it to Holyrood first, and Holyrood, if they give it to Scotland at all, and then Holyrood decides how to disperse it, there's no direct relationship between the British Parliament and councils in Scotland in the way that there should be. All of that was just given up during the devolution process to Holyrood. And so, if the SNP want to keep us mired down in poverty forever, they can do so. We don't. It's not like we can bring in the British government to speak for us. I'm going to develop that point further when we draw this to a close in a couple of minutes. But as PBC says, Scotland seems more divided now than it's ever been.
Well, this is, in my opinion, an effect from the SNP, who has done that specifically to divide the people of Scotland, a kind of divide and conquer tactic. You're either with us or against us, and that way it's much easier to try and manipulate us when everybody's stuck in their own bubbles, arguing with themselves to a huge degree. Because when do you ever really get a real debate between a unionist and a nationalist that actually has fundamental good points from either side? You never tend to get them anymore. You get politicians that maybe debate, but they're of no caliber, no good caliber, that is. And I suppose, going back to the question, if I was First Minister, I would actually want to see legislation that would stop any part of the United Kingdom ever leaving the United Kingdom, because fundamentally I think that we're one country, we're one United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and to take away a part of that country without the hearsay of the other parts of that country, I think would be a great failure of the establishment, and it would be put upon the British people against much of Britain's will. So I wrote, interestingly, a couple of years ago when I was at college, that I thought that if there was to be a written British Constitution, that the first amendment, so to speak, would be that no part of the United Kingdom could leave the United Kingdom without having a vote, first in that region of the United Kingdom and then in the rest of the United Kingdom. And both would have to be a vote to leave, and I think that would stop a lot of the division that goes on. So, for example, if if England wanted to leave the United Kingdom, they would have a vote in England, and say by some fluke that went through and it was a yes vote to leave the United Kingdom, well then Scotland, England and Northern Ireland and Wales would all have to vote as one to decide if that should be implemented or not. And I think that would stamp down on a lot of the issues that we have in terms of separatism.
Absolutely. That's a good idea, and it would have to be a vote like a 2/3 majority or something like that. You know, there'd have to be a threshold as well that had to be passed
100%.
in every case. And I'm glad you've written about this, and we've written about it ourselves before as well, about how it's far too easy to break up the United Kingdom. I mean, Gerry Adams pointed this out immediately after the Scottish election. He says it appears that the British Union hangs by a thread, is how he put it, which simply requires only a majority vote in one of the areas. And that's no way to hold a nation together. Absolutely
not.
No way at all.
Imagine one of the states in the United States had a vote to leave, for example, California. This is a bad example because a lot of the United States would probably be chapping at the bit to get rid of California at the moment. But just take, for example, California had a vote to leave. Well, do you really think the rest of the Union, the United States Union, is really going to let them secede? I don't think so, because fundamentally that doesn't just affect California, that affects the entirety of the United States of America, and all Americans should have a vote in such a matter. And the same goes for the United Kingdom, in my opinion. But I'm maybe dreaming in that regard, because with such powers at force like the SNP, etc., it's very hard to try and get this point across, because they would try to alienate you as some sort of extremist that doesn't care about the will of the Scottish people, when in actuality I probably care a lot more than them, but I care about the entire will of the British people, not just the Scottish people.
Absolutely, and that's the way that it should be. And for those of us who are pro-UK, we definitely see things within that wider British context. We don't just see it as four nations all at each other's throats. We see the whole creation, the whole 100%. Entity as one. Carl, we've spoken for our 20 minutes and we're going to have to get you back on, because I know that you can talk about these matters in great depth, lots of stuff that you're aware of every night. You're broadcasting almost on YouTube there. If you go onto YouTube and search for Carl D. Pearson, and you've also got a Telegram channel, I believe, and right. Which is / Carl D. Pearson, and you've also got a Twitter at Carl Pearson UK.
Thank you
and
very
so that's
much
where people can find out absolutely more about you, and we'd love to appear on your program if you ever do interviews or whatever, but we will definitely get you back as soon as possible, actually, if you're up for that. We'll get you back. Of course,
yeah,
good.
I'd love to. It's been a great chat, Alistair, and I really appreciate you having me on. And thanks to everybody in the comments for bearing with me, because I know I have a tendency to maybe rant a bit more than I should, but I am passionate about these issues and keeping the United Kingdom connected.
Yes, absolutely. Good, Carl. Okay then. Thank you, Carl, for your remarks.
Bless.
Take care. Good night. The fantastic Carl D. Pearson, who is a fantastic fellow, wise beyond his years, as they say about people like him. He's a great asset to the pro-UK Unionist cause. Fantastic to have him here in Scotland. So please do say thanks to Carl there. Very good. What I was talking about there about the levelling up agenda. I was reading this article in the last Wednesday's Herald, actually. Levelling up may bypass Scotland and it will be our fault. And the person was just pointing out here that the Michael Gove is dealing directly with the councils in England. This particular person who wrote this article appears to be making a case for regional mayors. I don't think that's necessary at all, but the point was nevertheless that there was direct contact between people in the council and the British government. But here in Scotland, local government, quote, falls squarely under the responsibility of the Scottish Parliament. And so if the British government has a good idea and wants to level up Scotland, it has to negotiate all of that through the Scottish Parliament, which of course it may as well not even bother. So what needs to happen is that the Scottish office here in Scotland, which is to say the British government in Scotland, the Scottish office, or the UK government in Scotland as they call it now, the Scotland office. The Scotland office needs to develop its contacts directly with local councils so that it bypasses Holyrood. And we said this here: build up the power of the Scotland office. In our magazine, Do More Together. Build up the power of the Scotland office. And basically, you would then have a three-way balance of powers. You would have a strong British Parliament in Scotland, you would have Holyrood, and you would have the local councils. And the British Parliament would be able to speak directly to the councils and directly give the councils money where they needed it. And goodness knows we need it these days. And so that's in our 40-page magazine, Union Heart. 40-page full colour. Please do get yourself a copy. It's only a £5, including postage in the UK. And it is basically an education in how to keep the United Kingdom together. Concentrating on the big British picture. We'll put the links up there actually for it. Now we'll probably run 5 minutes a little bit over schedule. We've got Busting Indy Myths coming up now. And this is our weekly section where we look at a popular Scottish nationalist myth and we simply deconstruct it within 2 minutes 20 seconds if we can manage to do it within that time. So, Busting Indy Myths, Part 6. Scottish nationalists will say that if they got separation, the SNP would disband. That's complete nonsense. They say it in order to lull people into a false sense of security, to make people believe that, oh, it might not be so bad because at least the SNP won't be around. On the contrary, the SNP will continue to be around, it will be more powerful and it will be more dominant. And the reason for that is for at least 4 political facts of life. 1, the SNP is a multi-million pound machine. Okay, it pays well-paid political careers to politicians and hangers-on. The idea that these people are just going to throw in the towel at the moment of their greatest triumph is absurd. On the contrary, there will be an influx of hundreds of people wanting a piece of the action and a piece of the money. So it's not going to disband for that reason. Secondly, the SNP would very quickly become the true church of Scottish politics and the guardians of the revolution. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, the SNP would claim to be the true representation of the will of the Scottish people. And indeed, who would have the nerve to disagree with them? Every action of every other politician would be measured against the Scottish National Party's point of view. They would become the true church that everybody had to believe in, and they would be the guardians of that revolution, and they would be on the lookout for anti-revolutionary behaviour. And the phrase, if you don't like it, move to England, would become a demand, not just an ignorant and crass comment. Thirdly, the SNP will never be satisfied anyway. Okay, can you imagine the fun they would have with trying to negotiate the divorce settlement? Some of them today Well, we broke up just while I was in the middle of mid-rant there, so I'll start again at number 3 so that we can edit it properly. Thirdly, the SNP will never be satisfied. Imagine Scotland under the SNP trying to negotiate the divorce settlement with England. Okay, it would last for years and years and years. Some of them are still complaining and are still uptight about the Union of 1707. You can still see them writing letters to the national newspaper complaining about that. So clearly, if they got their separation, they would be talking about it and arguing about it for hundreds of years to come. So they're always going to have a role to play in complaining about things. The SNP will never be satisfied. That's another reason why it's going to continue to exist, even after such a terrible thing as separation. And fourthly, and most importantly, independence or separation will not make England go away. England is always going to be there, and if there were to be Scottish separation, England would come back just as strong as ever, and just as politically powerful as ever, and likely even more politically powerful. Imagine it, the entire political debate in the British Isles would degenerate into basically Scotland versus England, England versus Scotland, all over again. Okay, so the conclusion is that in the event of separation, the SNP would not disband. In the event of separation, the SNP would not disband. It would continue to be dominant. It would continue to be even more powerful than ever. And that's a very scary thought. But, you know, there's always going to be a significant minority of people in Scotland who want separation from the rest of the United Kingdom. So what's the answer? And the answer is, as we say in our magazine here, in Union Heart, concentrate on the big British picture. Let's realise the danger of removing us all, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales, from the big British pond that we all swim around in and rub along in together. Let's realise the danger of that, and let's realise that we've got more in common than what divides us, and that our political institutions should represent that fact. And so politically, that means, as we say in our magazine, working continually to promote the values of solidarity over separation and of unity over division. To always seek to do more together. Always seek to do more together, as we say here in our magazine, do more together. And to appreciate and teach about the benefits and the value of our precious common inheritance here in our shared United Kingdom. And that's something that we as an organisation will be concentrating on in the months and years going forward. So this is our 10th year, and we're going to have a 10th birthday party on the 19th of March in central Glasgow. And if you're a donor or an activist for a force for good, you're invited, okay? So please do send us an email if you'd like to come along to contact@forceforgood.uk. We'll put the address up there, contact@forceforgood.uk. Please do come along, and please do contact us so that we can then tell you more about it and give you the details. But we're going to be having our 10th annual birthday on the 19th, Saturday the 19th of March, in the afternoon of Saturday the 19th of March in Glasgow. So it's an opportunity for you to come into Glasgow, have a nice day and meet some great people. So if you're a donor or an activist, please do contact us, and we'll give you the details. Contact us at that address, please. Okay, folks. And don't forget your wee book for the Union, which is a handbook for all pro-UK people. That helps to develop the British narrative, the story that we tell about our nation. Because without a narrative, what is there to hold? the United Kingdom together. So we help to develop that narrative in here. And there's more work to be done. There's so much more work to be done on this story. So much more work. And we've got it all in our heads and planned. And we're going to be here for another 10 years. We'll develop that point at a wee talk that we'll give at the birthday celebration. Folks, thank you very much for watching. Folk on TikTok, the best place to see us is on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Adam makes a good point. The wee book for the Union should act as a passport so that no imposters can get in. Have you got your... Do you have your wee book, sir? Yes. Yes, I have my passport. Catherine likes it. She says it's a great book. Just flash that up again. There you go. Happy 10th birthday. Great book. We'll take a screenshot of that and that will help us to flog it on the internet. Catherine, thanks. Arnie says, thanks, Alistair. Adam says, long live the Queen. Long live the UK. Oh, competition. Who won the competition? Thank you, Stephen. I was almost away there. We're almost going to be away. Do we have a winner? Do we have a winner? Do we have a winner? Oh, crikey. We may have a winner. Let me just see. Yes, we do. We do have a winner. Several people with the correct answer, and we'll flash up that we have a winner button there. Raymond Stewart. Congratulations, Raymond. You are the proud owner of these sweeties, which will be coming to you tomorrow. We'll get these in the post to you tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much for coming in with your answer. Thank you also to Peter and to others there, Stephen, to Debbie, and to several others who gave us the answer. And that's great. And thank you to Stephen for reminding me about that. I was too wrapped up in trying to get my Busting Indie Myths thing done properly to remember about that. Tommy says, congratulations. TC says, well done, Raymond. Debbie says, congrats, Raymond. Adam, congrats. Stephen. Ronald, if you want a copy of our magazine, you just buy it from the link, from the Do More Together link there. But it'll be double the price, I'm afraid. For send us an email, Ronald, and we'll figure out how much it is to send it to America, and you can just purchase it, and we'll chuck in the other issues as well. But send us an email there and we'll work out a price for you. Okay, cheers. Okay, folks, thank you very much for watching. It's quite a busy night tonight. Lots of comments, and it just remains for me to say we'll be back next week, same time, same place, 7 to 8. So until then, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.